this is Amanda Kafka from the Crafty Jackalope. I'm here to bring you some joy. Today is part one of seaming up your Deb Cardi cardigan style. I have been using the Instagranny from Katia. It's really cool. Each ball makes three squares and they're self striping. And there's a little bit of a learning curve to get the stripes to match up, but once you get it, it's super addictive and so much fun. And I seamed my crochet squares, my granny squares, with this Katia Sky, which has a little bit of twinkle in there. I don't know if you can see. Really pretty. An alternative though is this Heritage 6, which is a sport weight. And it can be, this is a worsted weight, but it can be a little bit thinner. And of course, I love to add a little bit of sparkle, or be really pretty, maybe not in this color per se, but we've got lots of colors of the Mega Bling. The way I seamed up my cardigan is after I completed all my squares. I did 27 squares, so I used 9 balls of the Instagranny in 6 different colors, so it's all crazy colors, which I love. And of course I've added Mega Bling to some of the squares, some of the rounds, and that's optional obviously, but so much fun if you do. It turns out a maze bling. For my 6th round, I've used the Katia Sky while I also seam. So you're completing one last round on your squares. So I have my square here. I'm going to complete one round of the sky while I seam the squares together. And today I'm going to show you just how I do that. So important thing to do is once you finish all your squares, you want to steam them flat. I do wet block at the very end just to set everything and get everything nice and even looking, but just to work with your squares after, it's nice that you can just use an iron and blast steam on both sides, whether you use sparkle or not. I also wove in all my center ends. I don't know why, but I think it's just one less thing to do at the end. And these ones that are on the side, I can sort of tuck in as I seam, and that's sort of a little bit less work. So at the very least, I just weave in those center. So I'm going to show you how to do this. I lay out all my squares and I take a photo of it, and that way I can reference it, because it does take a little bit of time to do your final round and seaming, and sometimes you don't have the space to keep it out, so it's good to have a photo, a visual reference. And it's also good to work on a flat surface if you can, opposed to on your lap. Oftentimes as I'm seaming, when it gets sort of more difficult, which we'll talk about in part 2, side seams or the sleeve seam, where you're not only seaming squares together, but you're seaming to make it 3D, a dimensional piece. So that would be in like this area here, like center front here. This is underarm. So not only did I have to seam this square to this, I also had to seam the front to the back, and then same with the sleeve. To make that dimensional, you're going to have to seam this square to this square at the same time doing this square. But we'll talk about that in part 2. Today I just want to show you the basics of seaming my squares together. So what I do is I pick my first square that I want to work on, and the very first one you're going to do just simply work around doing a complete 6th round in your granny square pattern that you've been working on, but in the very first one you're going to do a complete round. So I'll start with a slip knot, because I'm starting a new color. I'm no longer using the Instagranny, I'm using my alternative border yarn. And I always start, so it's the cluster on the right after. So I'm gonna put my hook into that space, right into that space, grab the yarn, come through as a slip stitch. And then I'm gonna do my chain 3, 1, 2, 3, as you do at the start of every round. And that's the first leg of my first cluster. And then I'm gonna do 2 double crochets to finish that first cluster. So there you have the cluster. I'm gonna chain 1 and then work 3 double crochets into the next space. So this is exactly how we worked around the making our granny squares in the beginning. So it's the same pattern. So when I'm traveling, I chain 1 in between my clusters, and then when I get to my corner, in that corner area, I'll be doing the chain 2. So now I'm in the first cluster of that corner, and just like you've been doing, you do your 3 double crochets, and then you're going to do chain 2s, and then you're going to do your second cluster in that same corner. And that doesn't change when I'm independently going around my border, or if I am also attaching as I go. The same sequence. You're always going to do 1 chain between the clusters when you're traveling, and the 2 chains in between the 2 clusters in the corner. And the concept is, when you do those chain stitches, either the 1 or the 2, you'll be attaching, that's where you'll be attaching your second square. So I'm just going to go around here, almost done my second side. My second corner. My chain 2, my second cluster. What I like about this seaming technique is that, unlike knitting, like if I knit a sweater and then I need to seam it up, that's sort of like another story, you know, another task I have to do. But this feels just like I'm still crocheting the same project, you know, just because I'm working the same pattern. So I'm not like seaming it, like I'm not sewing it together. I'm just crocheting my final round, and that's super fun. And then as it comes together, that's really exciting as well. So it's a good technique, I think, for seaming. So now I'm coming up almost to my third corner. And the other good thing about crochet is if you make a mistake, it's just that 1 stitch you have to deal with, really. You can see this first square, this would be the first square that I attach. And I'm working an entire round independently in my border color, just adding that border. And you would start any project, whether you're making a vest or a cardigan or a blanket or whatever, or a bag. If you're attaching in this technique, you would always work your first square that you want to attach independently and just do the whole round. So now I'm coming up to my final corner. Here we are here. you can sort of catch those ends in there. It's just a little bit less weaving in. Chain 2. And then chain 1, and then I'm going to slip stitch into that first cluster I did just a couple times to complete the round, and then I'm going to break my yarn. First square with an entire round of my border. So now what I want to do is I want to attach this square to this. So this one, it just shares one seam. So I'm going to start here and I'm going to work all the way to here independently. So that means if I were to start here and then attach, seam it, and then I would have to hold both of these squares because they would be attached and go around. So I want to work as much as I can independently on my next square as possible. So I always lay it out and see, okay, I am going to seam here. So if I start in this space here, I can go all the way around to my first corner, and then I can seam. So let's go ahead and do that. And I'm always having the good sides facing up as I work. So I'll do my slip knot. I'm going to start here. So I'm going to grab my square. I'm going to do a slip knot into there, and then I'm going to do my chain 3, 1, 2, 3, just like I started that first square. And then I've done 2 double crochets. I've got my 3 legs, chain 1, and now I'm going to work all the way to the corner before my side seam. I'm at the corner. I'm going to do 1 cluster in that corner. Oops. So I'm doing 1 cluster and I'm going to chain 1, but I need 2 chains in that space. But now I'm going to start to seam up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to chain 1 into this space, because you can see, start to seam it up, catching in all those chain spaces. So I've done 1 cluster, 1 chain, and my second chain in my corner is going to be attached to the square. So what I need to do is I need to make sure my yarn is to my right here. If it's this way, it's going to get in the way. So I always put it to my right, and my good sides are facing up, and I'm actually going to go in from the bottom. So from the bad side to the good side, I'm going to put my hook in from the bottom up. I'm going to catch that yarn and I come through, and I've got 2 stitches on my hook, and then I'm going to bring that yarn through. So what I've done here, my yarn is to the right. Put my hook back in there, and I'm gonna go from the bottom up into that 2 chain space in my corner. I'm gonna hook my yarn and come right through, and I've got 2 stitches on my hook. I'm gonna hook my yarn again and come through those 2, and that's considered my second chain in my cluster. And then now put your yarn wherever you like, and you can do your second cluster in that corner. So as we finish the border, of this pink and orange square, I'm also going to be attaching and going into all these chain spaces as I go work down the seam. I've done my second cluster in that corner. Now my yarn is to the right, and I'm going to go from the bottom up through that chain space in this square. I'm going to grab the yarn, come through. I've got 2 stitches on my hook, and I'm going to come through both of those hooks. That's considered my chain 1. As you do a cluster and you do a chain 1, I do a chain 1 instead of independently on this square, I'm doing it on this. So now I'm going to work down doing my double crochet, cluster, and now I need to do a chain 1. So my yarn is out of the way. I'm going to go from the bad side to the good side. My hook is going up that way, hooking around and coming through. And now I'm just going to work on this square. Oops. Doing a double crochet, cluster. Okay, I've done my cluster, and then I'm going to chain 1 into the next space. And then I'm going to chain 1 into this next space, and then do my final cluster before I get to the corner. And then I'm going to do one more chain here, and it should all match up, so all your clusters will be parallel. So now I'm into my corner, and I'm going to do my first cluster in my corner, and then my first chain, so I've done my first cluster, my first chain 1 will be into the corner of the other square. So I just, same way I've been doing it. Then I'm going to do another chain 1, and then I'm going to work my second cluster in that corner. And then I'm going to chain 1 independently because I'm at the end, and I just need to join these. So then I'm going to go into the space and do a slip stitch. And I just do a couple slip stitches, and then I break my yarn, and there you have it. So you can see how they are parallel. These clusters are parallel to each other along the side, and you can see I've done my chain 1 catching in this space. Okay, so there you have it. So that is the basics of seaming up your squares, and you're going to work that way all the way through your sweater. So what I basically do is do all the squares that don't share a side seam first, and then I set my sleeves, which is in part 2, and then I work my side seams, which is also in video part 2. So I hope that is helpful and clear, and If you have any questions, you can always comment below and like and subscribe. Thanks everyone.